sell onions and potatoes and tomatoes, because people would make their Sunday gravy out of this stuff, and would have a competition who sold the most. Sadly, 30 years after so-called freedom, we still have children learning under trees. We still have children falling into pit latrine toilets.
The sacrifices people made for the idea of the ANC and what they did for that idea and where we are now is such a travesty.
Maybe some guy that I'm bump into at Pick and Pay or whatever could be the guy who tortured me.
Enjoy a wide range of views on this channel. Spread the fire.
Spread the fire.
Spread the fire.
Spread the fire. Welcome back to SMWX, and today I have a very special episode for you and a very special guest. As we celebrate time with our families over this holiday period, I thought, why not bring a member of my family to the show? None other than the People's Advocate, Dali Mpofu, known to me as Dad. How are you, Dad? Thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you very much, Sis. It's good to be here. Great to be here.
It's really wonderful to have you here. You've been a supporter of this channel before it broke through the sound barrier. Watching, also people seem to think we kind of conspire to set media agendas, and so it's nice to just do it in public and just have our conspiracy meeting in public.
Yes, absolutely. It has to be open now. Yeah. The conspiracy started well back with Entity.
Exactly. Yeah, so no, we're really glad to have you, Dad. And today, I wanted to really unpack your story. It's an important archive and document for our family, because I think generations will go back and watch it and, get to know who you are. It's interesting because you're a really famous person, and I feel that. I think you're probably one of the most recognizable people in South Africa these days. But it's striking how someone can be so famous, but also people don't know so much of their story. They see you, in the headlines representing all these well-known and often controversial clients. But take us back to where things started for you, where you were born, and how you grew up.
Yeah, no, thanks, Sizwe. The irony, I think, of this interview is that it's almost like a lost opportunity for me. I've always had this aspiration of doing an interview with my mother. Wow. But unfortunately, she passed away before we could realize that, Because to answer your question, that's actually where it all started. She was probably what built me to be who I am now. And although my father also played a role, he passed on much earlier on in my life. And but even before that, she was the breadwinner because he was not generally well. And so I do think that most of the values that I got really, or that I think have guided me, come from her. Resilience, never say die, spirit, hard work, very important. But the single-mindedness and single-mindedness of purpose are things that have driven probably most of the phases in my life, whether you're talking about upbringing, from infancy, actually, schooling, the bouts of detention and all the things that I'm sure we'll talk about, leadership at university level, leadership in the community organizations, politically and otherwise, and even leadership in the legal profession.
Yeah, it's interesting you say that about the goal you had, which I didn't know about, of wanting to interview Mamdolo, because that would have been a special interview. And I often feel like we don't have a lot of these intergenerational conversations. I know in our generation, our parents have done so much and been through so much, but we often actually don't even know your own stories.
Yeah.
And I think this will also encourage that intergenerational conversation to happen.
Yeah.
Do you have any stories of Mamtolo and in the early years of your life that illustrate the kind of role that she played and the strength of her purpose in what were dire circumstances of poverty?
Yeah, look, as you know, we grew up in, I was born in a place called Duncan Village. In fact, the very first shot of that interview would have been at that clinic because it's still standing.
Wow. It's still there.
It's still there, yeah. And grew up in what I always call a one-bedroom house, quote unquote, which was really a glorified shack, simply because it had bricks instead of corrugated iron. But it was literally just 4 walls, called the house. The story that strikes me the most about her determination to succeed is one that I couldn't even remember because I got it from her. Of walking, she would always tell us because I used to walk to school, which was a bit far, and she would say, "Look, that's nothing." She had to walk from this place in Duncan Village, which is called C-section, to Quigney, which is close to the beach where she was working. And one story that stood with me is how she said, just out of sheer embarrassment for not having shoes, she would think of this idea of putting a bandage around her foot or her one foot, so that, people will think the reason she's not wearing shoes is because she's got some injury of some sort, But, and walk to work.
So also speaks to her humor and creativity.
Yes, absolutely, and creativity. And, that shows you the kind of abject poverty that we're talking about, where people like her were forced to have to work, for white families, get all sorts of abuse. And I still remember that, for example, we could phone. There was the old telephone, public telephones. So I still know the telephone number of by heart, So if there was something, obviously we had no phone at home, but there was a phone at the post office. So if I wanted to talk to her, I would phone there and, the madam pick up the phone.
Because she worked as a domestic worker.
As a domestic worker, yes, And so I would have to say, may I speak to Doris, which was her slave name. And then she'll be called and so on and so on. So I had no idea what this place looks like here because I had never been inside. Even when we went there, we had to stand outside and and she comes and very quickly does or gives you whatever and then move away, The funny thing, of course, is that a few years later when I got arrested for the first time, the police took me straight to that place.
Wow.
And so I can't imagine what she had to go through. But anyway, Sure. No, so she really, brought us up with that understanding that she with a resolution that although she had no education, but she would give her children education. And as it happened, the three of us then, went and did something with our education. And we were lucky also to have have it relatively easy at school, let me put it like that. Because all her 3 children were actually good performers at school. And I suppose that was also, it had something to do with that determination to succeed.
So the academic gene goes way back.
Well, some of us might not have had PhDs, but no, it was quite something. I mean, I always brag about the fact that, for example, in my matric class, when we wrote, we were 173 people who sat for that exam. And when it was announced that there's only one person who got a first class university exemption, everyone knew exactly who that probably was. Yeah.
I mean,
and had that not happened, by the way, we probably wouldn't be.
Well, we definitely wouldn't be. I certainly would. You might be here.
Certainly.
Like, I really always think of that, Dad, and I think of. I have no idea how you did so well in matric, under such conditions of poverty, and I don't know where you found the dedication to do that, but had you never got that scholarship from that school, then literally your life also would never have gone the way it did. You had to get that scholarship in those matric exams, and you got it somehow. And you were the only person.
Absolutely. No, it was quite intense as well. Yeah, there were many of those turning points, which I always think about now. I mean, as you know, even before that, I had already worked in a factory.
Yeah, absolutely.
And
we're going to get out of
the detention and so on. And again, I left that employment out of principle because my comrades had been retrenched. And that's when I decided I'm not going to continue this. I'm going back to school, which at that stage was like a huge decision. I think my mother was shocked because everyone, including myself, had thought, okay, well, this is it. We're going to just aspire to be a supervisor and a manager or whatever in the car manufacturing plant. But a decision like that at a particular point, which said, look, you have to go back and make this what looked like a sacrifice then of leaving a job. So it's those kinds of turning points which I'm quite sure had they not happened, we would be talking a completely different language now. But yes, the matric one was quite something because I think generally we were not allowed in those days to even leave the black universities. So the best I could have aspired to, which even that was a remote possibility, would have been to go to Fort Hare, maybe study something. But to come to Wits was completely unthinkable. And the only key was really that good matric outcome.
Well, I want to pick up a lot of the milestones in the journey that you've spoken about. But can we go back to your father, my grandfather, after whom I'm named and my son is named?
Yes.
He died when you were quite young. But can you tell us about him and your relationship with him and what you remember about him?
Yeah, no, he was the most doting father. And
a common theme.
A common theme in the family. Yeah, not to mention the doting grandfathers of today.
We've given up with you and the grandfather.
So, and this is a guy who was quite, revered in his own circles. I mean, he was the Imbongi of the area. His biggest passion was horse racing. Nobody in that until today, people still talk about the horses that he bred and used to race across the length and breadth. I myself participated in this at some stage.
Wow!
Although I was not the most successful jockey in the world, but. So that was his great passion, and he got sick before I even could become like aware of my surroundings and stopped working. He had been working as a laborer at Wilson Roundtree sweet making factory, which is still there. And after that, he ended up doing odds, this and that. Yeah. At some stage, I mean, there's something I just remembered recently that at some stage he used to fix umbrellas. He was the umbrella fixer of the area. I don't even know where that came from. So if people had their umbrellas broken or whatever, they'd bring, and he was able to reassemble it and charge them a few, probably 20 cents or 30 cents in those days. Yeah.
Sure.
But more than anything, I think he was almost the mirror opposite of my mother. My mother was the strictest parent you can think of.
Really?
Yeah, no nonsense, and you had to. I mean, one of the chores I hated the most was this idea of when she comes from wherever, she goes past the market and decides to buy tomatoes and this and the other just to augment her salary. And then who's going to be walking around the township selling these things? So we knew that once you see that box of something coming, it means, literally it's going to be taken into some dish and you go around selling.
So this, you with your siblings would literally go around.
Yeah, we would have to. Yeah, and it was actually a big thing. On Sundays we would sell onions and potatoes and tomatoes, because people would make their Sunday gravy out of this stuff, and would have a competition who sold the most. And I'm sure she was enjoying this. But for her, that was it. You know, you had to know, all this, that the food that you're eating, we all have to contribute. He, on the other hand, was the softy. And I was telling somebody recently of the bribery. You know, like if he was forced to kind of lay a hand on you or speak roughly, because he has to please she who must be obeyed. Thereafter, when she's not there, kind of
don't worry,
it's fine. And by the way, here, do you like to have some 2 cents or 5 cents or something?
That reminds me of a certain other father as well. I remember if I got a bad report or something, and my mother is not the strictest herself, but she would then say, no, your father needs to talk to you about this, and then it would be
wink, wink.
And then I'd have to come out and say,
this was tongue lashing. So he, I mean, like her, basically these were just two working class people.
It speaks to the legacy of apartheid at its worst in many ways, Dad, because everyone knows your intellect, your talent, and you were somehow able to break out of that, but we know that there are generations of our family, of so many families, black families in South Africa, where there were geniuses, there were people who could have done and been anything, and they were simply oppressed to the point where their prospects were poverty.
Absolutely. And I think really that's what it is. It just shows you the potential and the waste of humanity, human resources, leadership that even now must be embedded in all these shacks that you drive past. And sometimes you just have to wonder how many potential physicists or all types of other leaders are sitting in those shacks. It's amazing how many Olympic gold medalists, racing drivers, musicians, all sorts of people. And that's the tragedy of oppression, Sizwe, in that even for those few of us who managed somehow miraculously and sometimes quite luckily to escape that life, it must make you wonder as to what happened to what happened to the people who were your, let's call it, intellectual rivals at school.
Maybe even better than you.
Even better than you at many things, who fell by the wayside and just got trapped in the inevitable problems that are associated with poverty. And that is, for me, it's the most painful thing about apartheid, because we've had many systems of oppression everywhere, but one which deliberately, by law, actually says that this high percentage of people in this country are not going to be given an education. That's unheard of. It's something that I don't even think we grasp. The lost potential over decades of a regime that can say our policy is to make sure that these people get an inferior education. All these children, simply because of their color, will get an inferior education or no education at all. Because they must work, they must be trained to be slaves for a particular race. That is something that's going to take us centuries to come out of. And that's why the current regime is, it's a sin for them not, for example, to prioritize education. Because you'd think that a country coming out of that kind of brutality will do anything to make sure that there's a proper educational system. But sadly, 30 years after so-called freedom, we still have children learning under trees. We still have children falling into pit latrine toilets and walking barefoot to school, dilapidated classrooms, you name it. And that is just one example of what's wrong with the current system.
And we have in the history of the liberation movement, and I say so widely because the ANC has always just been one part of a broader liberation movement. At different times, different entities and organizations have risen up. There's this strong tradition of intellectual and academic excellence and great minds, whether you're talking about Maxeke or Tambo or Hani, but paired with strong activism. And it's one thing to be smart and achieve academically, but it's another to be politically conscious and shape society. And to do both is a tradition in which you certainly fall into. Tell us about how you became politically conscientized and the first period of detention at such a young age, and how that all happened. Because on the one hand, you're somehow doing well at school, but you're also active.
No, you see, to your point about the bridge between the intellectual class, let's say, and the masses, that has, I think, for so many generations become the cornerstone of our struggle, really. Going back to the times, the 100-year war for the land, which I've been reading a lot about.
Interesting.
The 9 so-called frontier wars in the Eastern Cape in particular. It's the most amazing journey of heroism, of people resisting dispossession. I mean, just imagine 100 years fighting wars over 100 years, pausing for a number of years, starting again, and so on, until, of course, the defeat after the 9th War in 1878 or thereabouts. And the characters in those, in fact, there is a book that you're going to have to read. For now, somebody else is reading it. Your sister.
Very good, very good. Who's actually here, by the way. So it's a whole family affair for December.
But this book traces in great detail those wars. And I was saying to her the other day that, after reading this book, when you walk on any ground in the Eastern Cape, you will feel that you're walking on blood, which is true. So you have those people, that generation. Then, of course, you've got the generation of 1912 that formed the ANC. in response directly to the so-called Union of South Africa, which excluded African people, which then became a blessing in disguise, because the enemy thought they were dividing African people. But for the first time, there was a song which was sung at the formation of the ANC, which was Zulu, Xhosa, Msuthu, Hlanganani. So the irony was that for the first time, the people of South Africa realized that, look, we might have our ethnic or so-called tribal differences, but we're now being excluded as a group, and therefore we must respond as a group. And they formed the ANC. So again, that was intellectual forethought by those leaders. Then fast forward, as you said, to the 40s, when Mandela, Tambo, Lembede, and the others actually realized what you are saying, even in a sharper way, because it is said that at that stage in the mid-40s, the ANC probably had a couple of thousand members, and it was mostly the elite and so on. And Mandela and them realized that, no, for this organization to actually be a weapon in the hands of the people, it needs to speak to the people. And within a few years, it grew to something like 100,000 members. Why? Because Mandela and them started the 1952 Defiance campaign and massified the ANC, as it were. Right up to the Freedom Charter and up to its banning. And then another group of intellectuals took over. Sobukwe and the others sharply differed with the ANC's approach to non-racialism and the neglect of the land question. And they, for the first time, broke away from the ANC on that basis, particularly on the land question. Unfortunately, the banning of the organizations happened within a few months or years, and therefore the PAC never really got to be mass-based. But the seed had been planted, Then again, go to the 70s, where the Steve Biko's generation, another intellectual young group, comes in and introduces black consciousness into the mix. So you already have three traditions. You have the non-racial tradition, you have the Pan-Africanist tradition, and then you have black consciousness. And it is a mixture of all those that then produces our generation after the death of Steve Biko. And which now has to actually take the issues further and bring mass mobilization and actually action against the enemy, which culminates in 1994. So it's one continuum, literally from 1652 up to where we are. And therefore it's important for the current generation. That is why now in the EFF, for example, you have another generational mission, which has brought back the issue of land, particularly, which was forgotten, literally, into the fore, and has an amalgam, maybe, of Pan-Africanism, black consciousness, non-racialism, so-called charterism, and mixing that with the teachings of Fanon and other great African thinkers.
Absolutely. And how does that relate back to your life and how you become involved in politics at such a young age and part of that longer liberation tradition?
Well, that's an interesting story because as far as I can remember it starts with there was an uncle of mine who passed on quite early, he was a relative of my mother's, on my mother's side. His name was Mfusi Moss. And this guy was probably, I'd say he would have been the best organizer or recruiter. Because he kind of, in a subtle way, would come, talk to us, me and my sister in particular, about the situation and so on. And I always say my earliest memory is when he gave me this book, Cry the Beloved Country, which by then I think was even banned. I mean, it's such a liberal piece of paper
Even
now.
that was,
But even that was banned, yeah. So I read this at the age of 13 or so and thought, wow, yeah. And then he had another one which was called Black Like Me, not to be mistaken with the hair product.
Right, yeah.
And so through all this, got us involved in a way, and conscious of our surroundings. But 1976 for me became the turning point.
Yeah.
Because I was at that stage in Standard 6. And, the waves of 1976 spread across the country. And I think they probably reached my part of the world around about August or so, after all these things. And we participated. We did probably the best we did was just not to come back to school after the long break or something like that.
Well, to be fair, you were only in what is Standard 6? Grade?
Probably 4.
One of those. But so you were already...
Yes. So the most revolutionary thing was to refuse to come back to class after the break. Yeah. But that alone was some kind of consciousness.
Yeah.
And then, of course, the death of Steve Biko in 1977. That just broke the back. And talking about my mother, I told the story at her funeral.
Yeah.
That how we always maybe underestimate our parents. Yeah. So I used to read the news. She would come from the white people's place with a newspaper that's 2 or 3 days old. Which I probably got thrown away, and I would say, please, can I
So that's how you get your current affairs.
Yes, my current affairs about 2 or 3 days later. So she always told the story. This one day, she comes with the paper as usual, and then I pick it up, and she says, I drop it on the floor, walk away, and kind of, in a frenzy. And she says, what's wrong with this kid?
Yeah.
So she says, I said, oh, they've killed him. And she says, who?
Yeah.
And in probably condescending when I said, no, some guy, logo you won't understand. But anyway, obviously it was the biggest story. Everyone got involved in it because we, our home is probably 40 kilometers stone throw away from Ginsberg, where Steve Biko was. Yeah. So we all knew of him. And we never met him physically. Sure. But we used to read. It was the legend. The legend. He was in the papers. He was in court for this. He has been released for this or whatever. And I don't think at that stage I actually thought that the regime could be so brutal as to actually kill someone like that in such a brutal fashion. Of course, there were stories about people who had been given the death sentence in the 60s, but who were still even young to couldn't be like someone that you actually can relate to. And then, of course, that story grew and it became a big international story of how this person was beaten up. For what? Just for his ideas? And to death. And the funeral happened a stone throw away from where we lived.
And you were at that funeral, Dad?
No, my mother wouldn't have. I tried all my tricks to get to the funeral. But only my eldest sister Tobeka was involved.
So she got.
She got it, and she brought back for me that poster of Biko and solidarity. But I was there in spirit, definitely. But my mother wouldn't have none of it. Because it was obviously those were scary times. But thereafter, I think in 1979, you can say that's the time when I really now decide that, look, there's no other way but to get directly involved, become aware. We formed COSAS, which was a very big historical moment that sometimes gets forgotten. 79, 1980, I'm a leader of COSAS in the Eastern Cape, or at least in East London. And we participate in the new wave of second wave, if you like, of school boycotts in 1980. I'm a leader of that group, and the long and short of it is that we got arrested for arson and sabotage, which was like a big thing.
Yeah. So you allegedly were involved in.
I was
burning
allegedly involved in the burning of
Yeah.
my school
You-
and others.
You may or may not have been involved in the
Yes.
burning of a school.
No, I may or may not have been at that time at or near my school. Yeah.
Yeah, in and around the vicinity.
Yeah.
Wow.
But so that becomes a shocker. We're now at the age of 17 for me. And one of my co-accused was actually even younger. I think he was 15 or 16. And now you really meet for the first time.
Yeah.
You know, we've been talking in all these terms about the brutality of the state, but let me tell you, until you actually come across it, I remember our very first day, we were literally beaten up to pulp, you know, and
was this in the police
in the police
station?
cells in
Right. So
Tanzania.
when you'd been
Anyone.
arrested,
Yeah, we were arrested.
you're 17 at the time.
Yeah, 17. And I got so unlucky because I was visiting one of my comrades after the alleged offense.
Yes,
And,
which may or may not.
yes. And they were going to fetch him, and then they were going to go to my house because they already had information, I think. So they just find me there, like they are like, so when they do the raid, I jump into the blankets. And just before they left, they say, who's this now in the blankets wearing shoes? And they uncover and say, oh, it's Mpofu. Just join, get into the van.
What went through your mind when you're like, wow, I've actually been
like
caught
just
by
meeting
the
them.
police?
Yeah, it was absolute devastation. But as I say, there was a woman whose name was Tamara, I've forgotten her surname, who was part of our unit, as it were. There were two brave women who were part of our squad. And on that day, when we were being beaten up by these people for the first time, she actually fainted and lost consciousness. Yeah.
Sure.
The other one was a lady who was still, in fact, I talked to her even now. She left and went to exile. She's back.
Right.
We're in touch now. Pumeza, probably one of the bravest people I've ever known. Yeah. And, you know, my mother always tells me because they went to fetch her, when she saw us in that place where we'll be, the following day, she thought she was visiting a casualty ward in a hospital. And anyway, so that was the real first encounter with the brutality of the regime. And as you know the story, I stayed there. My 18th birthday I spent in that cell, where my comrades had to break pieces of bread to celebrate my birthday.
I remember when I turned 18, and now whenever anyone in the family turns 18,
they get told that story. Because in fact, that's why I have so much respect for the parents. Because every time each one of you turns 17 or 18, I'm sure you've heard this story so many times. I always think, if they were to take this little thing into some cell, I don't even think I would be able to sleep because at 17, 18, you know, in the eyes of your parents, you're still nothing really. But this regime was able to do that. Imagine those parents who didn't know where these kids are. No, you know, Steve Biko has just been killed recently, and you hear all these stories about what happens there, and you don't know where your child is. You can't visit them. You don't know when they will come back or if they will come back alive. So that's so much was the brutality of the state. Anyway, to cut a long story short, we then do the trial.
Well, can I elongate the long story?
The long story, yes. Okay.
to lengthen a short story. how long was that period of detention? And so you were arrested and you were detained. Was it because of the law that you were just basically detained for? Because I'm thinking like you were arrested, but then when was the trial? And,
yeah. It's confusing now with the kind of law, the so-called law. Yeah. No, what happened is that we were detained under, there was some law called, I think it was something called R252 of the what in the Sky, which was a country that you've never heard of. That was 90-day detention.
Sure, so it was 90. Okay.
The 90-day detention was a term of art, because all it meant was that you get detained for 90 days. So you sit there. If anyone who's never been in a prison cell will not believe this. You literally count. It's 1, 2, and then it's like 100 years before it's 3, and then it's another day, it's another day, and so on. But the irony is that as you get closer to 90, that's when you're getting worried, because the likelihood is that at 90 they're going to give you another order and start again at 1. 2, 3, exactly. But so that's what happened, and then it was under that, and in our case, so most people would then be released at some point or another. But in our case, because there was now this crime, we then got charged instead of being released, and then we were taken to court. Then we got bail or whatever, and then had to come back to do the actual trial now.
Sure.
So the that was quite something. I mean, it was very brutal.
So how long did the detention?
That first one took about August, April. I think I got out in November, early December. It took about 4 months or so. Wow. But before you think that was like a good thing, it ended up being like a Christmas break, because in January or early February of 1981, I was detained again. This time for possession of ANC literature and all sorts of things, which was a big thing. It was like that was like the worst thing you could do.
Just having literature about the ANC.
No, you could have your arson and your sabotage and so on, but to have anything material that connects you to the ANC,
that's why
was like
it's so sad now, and we will get to this later because I want to carry on with the story. But the sacrifices people made for the idea of the ANC and what they did for that idea and where we are now is such a travesty.
It really is, But I mean, I still remember now the exclamation of the police were raiding my house. In fact, I always tell the story. It's so funny because actually someone else had burnt a school or some building or rent office or whatever. And lazy as they were, they thought, okay, well, we know who the arsonists are. They come to my house. I'm sitting, I know nothing about this. But then just before they realized that I genuinely was sitting there, one of them finds this thing in, and exclaims.
What kind of literature was it? Do you remember?
It was, it was quite dangerous, quote unquote, at that time, because I think what shocked them, very subversive. What shocked them the most was that I had pamphlets, which were obviously for distribution, because we were part of an underground cell. So I had pamphlets which were talking about the raid that the SADF had done in Mozambique, where they killed ANC people in Matola. It's called a Matola raid. There were 2 significant raids where the SADF went into other countries and killed people. One was in Maseru, the other one was in Matola. Now, the biggest shock for them was the fact that this had happened literally at the end of January of 1981. And here I am 2 or 3 weeks later in East London with pamphlets dealing with this, which are clearly ANC pamphlets. So they thought, then you must be so well connected, because all these things used to take a long time to travel. That was the first thing. But the worst one was this, the ANC had this magazine called Sichaba. And I was cursing these ANC people at that time, who does this, outside of the thing, it has its title. I don't know if it's still, I'm sure somebody has got it in an archive. So it's written, Sichaba. And then below, in big bold, it says the official mouthpiece of the African National Congress. So
not ideal when there's a law against.
No, absolutely. So this policeman went like, somebody was beating him up. Yeah. Wow. And anyway, cut long story short, there was another stint in quite even more brutal detention. Because now it's February, March. Yeah. So it's winter. It's getting into the winter. I stay in a place called Dimbaza, which is just outside of King William's Town, close to the mountains. Very bitter conditions. Yeah. Until about, ironically, I'm released from that detention maybe in April, May, another 4 months or so. Yeah. Because I have to stand trial for the original accident sabotage. Yeah, that trial starts around April, May. Yeah, we get acquitted, I think, in June.
Let's come to that trial then, because I suppose there's another story that's starting to build there, which is that your love and knowledge for the law is starting to. You're accused, but you're now in a trial. And you're starting to see the law at work, even though the law is about you. Tell us about that trial. Are you 18 at the time? Or?
Yeah, I'm now, this is 8, I'm 19. Yeah, between 18 and 19, not yet 19. Yeah. I'm exactly 18 because I was going to turn 19 in September of that year. Yeah.
Tell us about that trial and how you also... Of course, it's major for your life because you don't know whether you're going to jail or not. But you're also starting to see the law for the first time. Like,
yes.
Yeah, and where you are now as like a senior advocate, that was the moment where it must have been in my head where you start understanding and thinking, the law.
Yeah. No, absolutely. I mean, it's another turning point, you'll realize one day when you're my age, there's all these many turning points. That particular turning point is significant, at least if you talk about the legal career. Because I always joke that I've probably now played every possible role you can play in the law. I've been an accused. I've been an attorney, I've been an advocate, I've been a judge, and the only one that was missing was being a prosecutor. But now I'm a private prosecutor, so I'm done all that, done it all, as it were. No, but what happened there is that it was quite something. I mean, there's a guy, and for some reason I never met this guy again. He was a young advocate called DPhil, who came to represent us in the trial, and he was so good. And I was fascinated by all this, the preparation for the trial. We had all these fascinating things. The trial within a trial. We had made so-called confessions, which were beaten out of us. How he had to show that these confessions were not really confessions; they were just results of people being beaten up, and that kind of thing. I was very impressed by this. By that time, of course, it was another bold decision to even stand the trial because one of my co-accused, Mzimasiala, left the country because we either had to face the trial or leave and join MK. One of the guys thought, I'm not taking this chance of going to Robben Island or something. I'm leaving. So he left. So only 3 of us were left. Anyway, at the end of this trial, this advocate guy says to me, look, we've had all these interactions and preparations and how I performed in the box and all that. So he just basically says, you'll make a great lawyer one day. I think, okay. Wow. I mean, I've been accused. Only my mother used to sarcastically call me the lawyer if I was answering, trying to get out of some difficult situation.
Yeah.
Anyway, so that was when the seed was planted, as it were.
Wow.
Then I go back to school, as I've said before. And then I'm quite good at maths and science and all these things. And I get an engineering scholarship, so forget about the law. So I go to Wits to study engineering. Yeah.
Can we stop there again? Because like you've just been detained twice and had a criminal trial.
And worked at a factory.
Right, let's go there. So you're acquitted?
Acquitted around about June, July. Great. It's obviously too late now to go back to school.
Right.
Because I've also just come out of my other detention.
Of course, yeah.
So what else am I going to do? I have to look for a job because I'm just sitting there doing nothing.
Yeah.
And I look for a job. That's another story for another day.
Yeah.
Anyway, eventually I get employed at what is today called Mercedes-Benz South Africa. In those days it was called CDA. And I become a spot welder, which is like literal, probably the lowest form of laborer you can get in that place here, where we're now making cars and assembling Mercedes-Benz and all that. Inevitably, I joined the union.
Yeah,
knowing
because
me. Yeah.
it was always
what else can you do? Yeah.
Shame that plant didn't know what was about.
Yeah, absolutely, yeah. And by the end of that year, I'm leading a strike, one of the biggest strike in the entire place. Yeah. And the South African Allied Workers Union, which was unregistered and like known as the subversive ANC union, were organizing in the factory. And then in December, as I say, they then retrenched. There were no labor laws to speak of in those days. Yeah. So quite frankly, what happened is at the end of the year, around about this time of the year, you close the factory. And you get your so-called bonus for the which is probably, I was earning something like 51 rand per week or something. But so you get a bit of a bonus and then you have to come back in January. And these guys literally did this. When we finished, maybe this could have been the Friday of congruent to that one.
Yeah.
You just come there, they give you a salary, and then they tell you, okay, you're not coming back.
Sure.
That's it. Bye-bye.
Yeah.
So this happens to maybe there were 10 so-called ring leaders of the strike here.
Yeah.
So it happens to maybe 6 or 7 of them. And for some reason, I'm not one of them. It's the other 7. And so we come out there thinking, we're going to, when we come back, we're going to have another strike and da-da-da. And, people, they spend the money in December. So in January, when we came back for the big action, the workers were not very keen because they wanted to get some money back.
Yeah.
And that's when I got frustrated and I just went and said, I'm out of here. Not before I had phoned the principal at my school to see if there was still a place here.
Wow.
And that was the big turning point.
So you were detained. Your trial, you leave the trial to go and work in a Mercedes-Benz factory.
Yeah.
And then decide, you know what, I'm actually going to go back to school.
Yeah.
And you were 19, 20 there?
Yeah, by now I'm 19, yes.
Yeah. And you go back to school and get, in that year, the one scholarship that gets you to Wits.
Yeah.
What was that year of school like? And do you remember, like, the work and how you managed to get yourself disciplined to do so well academically that year?
Yeah, I do. I mean, the first thing I did was to stop smoking.
Oh, wow. There we go.
Yeah. Because, back in the factory.
Yeah, exactly.
So
when you're a radical revolutionary worker.
Absolutely. You can't not have a cigarette in your mouth. Yeah. And so it was that kind of year. By the way, one of the most important things is that literally in February, which is when I just go back to school. This first time I ever came to Johannesburg, set my foot here, was in February of that year, 1982.
Okay.
Because in February, as just maybe 2 or 3 weeks back into school, the police here at John Foster Square killed Neil Aggett. Neil Aggett was a white trade unionist who was killed in detention. Yeah. So now some of my comrades in the union don't even know that I'm not there anymore. Yeah. So I get messages that on such and such a date, we're going to be hiring a bus and driving to Johannesburg for the funeral, because it's another big issue. So I put my name on the list, and then fortunately, I had the school principal was quite a progressive guy. He was an ex-Robben Islander, by the way. So he's the only one that I told that, look, I'm going to this funeral. The students and everyone else doesn't know this. So on Friday, when the bus is going to leave East London, I sneak out of school, get into the bus terminal, and we drive to Johannesburg. And this guy was such a sly one. So he apparently, after I left, went to my class, because we were supposed to have afternoon classes. Said, where's Mpofu? And they said, well, he was here, So when I came back the following Monday, they said, you are in trouble, the principal was looking for you.
Pretending to look.
Yes. Anyway, so we then come here for that funeral. So that's how my year started. Back to school, then it's, literally working as hard as I could. Yeah. And getting to write. I was even in something called the Matric Olympiad, Maths Olympiad. Or whatever. And so since probably 3 years before that, this was my first normal year, if you can call that normal. Yeah. And at the end of it, then the good results come.
Yeah. And then you end up going to Wits and becoming a student.
Yes. Then I get something called the cadet scheme. I come here. I'm an engineering student. I do a pre-engineering year, and then I do engineering 1, and then I hate it. Yeah. I ended up doing practicals in some mine. Yeah. And I remember thinking, because if this is going to be the rest of my life, like sitting and analyzing a rock for 6 weeks, I don't think. Yeah. And as it happened, another coincidence, because I was the leader of the house committee at Wits, we had a food boycott, which I was also part of the leadership thereof. So we got charged by the university. And we're actually going to be expelled. Yeah. So we go through this at the end of the year, this trial. And Skull, was one of the people defending us. Yeah. Wow. And so we get acquitted of this. So second time lucky. Yeah. We get acquitted. And by that process, I met Professor John Dugard, who was one of the progressive professors at law school. Yeah. So when I was sitting analyzing the rock, I decided to call Professor Dugard, because we also struck. He also thought, you should do law. Yeah, I should do law. So I phoned him and said, well, you said I should do law. Yeah. Do you think there's still place at law school? So he says, don't just call me in the next 2 hours or whatever. Wow. And I don't know, whatever he did. Yeah. I called him back. He says, you can come. So I come back.
Shout out to Professor Dugard.
Yeah, shout out to Professor Dugard. Yeah. So I then give up my very nice scholarship, which actually paid us a stipend. Wow. To start, and I had saved up money, because there's no one else was going. I couldn't say to my mother, I was earning like 100 rand a month or something. Can I have some money for fees? Yeah. So I've saved up some money. I pay at Wits in those days. You had to pay something like 40% up front. I paid that 40% to register for law, and then I didn't know how, where, and how I'm going to get the next amount, and until Kathy Setchwell comes into the picture. Yeah. So now Kgothatso, who was an attorney, a progressive attorney, says, okay, I'll pay for your 60%, but you're going to have to come and work at the end of the year. And she does indeed that. That becomes another chapter of my life. I ended up doing, in fact, last week I was at her farewell party. She's now living in Joburg to live in the Eastern Cape. A brilliant lawyer, great human being,
It's so amazing how there are these people at different parts of one's life. I think of Advocate Deva Pillay.
Yeah.
If anyone watching has any connection to that family or whatever.
Absolutely, and former Judge Kgothatso also played
absolutely.
a great
Prof.
role.
Dugard.
Yeah. Prof. Dugard, Kgothatso, ironically, after this payment for the fees.
And she became a judge.
Right? Yeah, she became a judge, and she's now a retired judge, And anyway, the following year, there's a state of emergency. In fact, 1985, there's a state of emergency. I get arrested again, get detained with people like Amos Masondo and others.
By the way, the other day I was at a wedding, and the groom's father, who was living in the US, came up to me and he said, hello, I know your father. And I said, I
join the club.
I get that a lot, and he said, in 1986 or something, we were in adjacent cells. So I was the cell next to him, and we only knew each other's voices. So we would talk to each other. Yeah. And then only when we came out did we actually see what the other person looked like. Yeah. This is Mr. Duma, I believe.
Yes. Yes.
Yeah, that literally...
Actually, it's true. Yeah, he was on this... we were in solitary confinement then. He was on this cell. The other cell was Zwelakhe Sisulu.
Wow.
And if I told you how... When we say we had the telephone. Now, you know what the telephone was?
No.
In the solitary confinement cell, you just have yourself, a space like this, and the loo. So you had to take away the water from the loo. I don't know where this came from. I'm sure someone else invented it earlier.
Yeah.
And the other person also takes away the water. Sure. Then you are able to talk.
Wow.
To them, as it were. Yeah. So that's how we used to communicate with Zwelakhe and the others, because the other people, they think you're sitting there doing nothing, meanwhile you're plotting all sorts of things through that system.
I know it's a tough subject, but solitary confinement must be among the worst things.
It is the worst thing that you can subject any human being to. I can tell you. You know, as I was saying to you, if you know this time that we have spent here now, you know, a couple of hours and so on. When you're in solitary confinement, you literally feel every minute of it, and you have to find coping mechanisms. In fact, sometimes you even look forward to the interrogation. They'd rather come and take you and interrogate you and torture you and do whatever than just sitting there. My funniest part about solitary confinement is because you'd have a thought. So I'd be sitting. If you were born, I would have said, okay, now I'm going to think about Sizwe. And then you to say, no. I think I'm going to save that thought for the evening.
It's like a series, no?
It's a big thing.
Netflix and think.
Exactly, It's like thinking you're going to play this. You can't watch this time.
No, that thought's too good. I'll save it for tonight.
I'll save it for tonight, And then you spend the whole night thinking, what was that?
Damn, I forgot the...
So it's things like that, the other funny thing I always tell people... There was a day where I was thinking and I was wondering, why am I thinking in English?
That was the
big thing, So,
but no, let me think about that.
Yes, exactly.
Shucks.
So it's quite that's real. I mean, whoever invented that knew how to torture a person. To the extent, I saw someone at the Kgothatso's thing recently. Ishim Kabela, who was a leader of Azapo. And when I got moved from solitary confinement, probably after 2 months or so, to the communal cell where everyone else was held in Johannesburg prison. And the absurdity of how brutal solitary confinement is when I was taken to those people, it felt like I was being released.
Wow.
So these comrades were sitting there brooding about going, and I thought, guys,
we're here.
We're here. We can talk, we can sing, we can play Scrabble or whatever. And I don't know what you're complaining about. If you knew where I'm coming from.
No, that's just
anyway. But
no, it's powerful. It's very powerful, that, and it's I think one thing I've always got from you, which you never necessarily had to say, and I think that all of the siblings is there's a certain strength and conviction and commitment, and I'm sure solitary confinement breaks a lot of people. But I've always suspected and thought that that's also probably where you found, when you're criticized in the media or like, I often hear you saying like, come on, but I'm sure that must have been a period where you found that like that strength to make it through what must have seemed like an impossible task.
No, absolutely. I mean, when you come out of that, something happens to you. And you're right. I think people would either at that point make a decision, a serious decision, to say, look, I'm not going to get involved in this. This is just too much. I didn't know that it's going to be like this. And many people did that. And you can't blame them. Because it was quite brutal. Nobody would like to be tortured and all that. Or their families would say, and that's why family support is also important. Look, you can't, you just can't do this. Or you take a decision there and then that this I'm going to do. If I die, I die. And it's a serious decision. It's not some emotional type of thing. It's a decision that you make at that point, and you are prepared literally to die for the cause. And so that's what happens. And that's why sometimes, I mean, I remember after one of my detentions, my earlier detentions, I think my mother thought I had lost my mind, literally, because I just came home and enjoyed the good meal. I still remember it was nice chicken and this and that and the other, and people were coming and celebrating and so on, and then in the evening I said, okay, I'll see you guys. She said, where are you going? I'm going to the meeting. I think it was like the most natural thing. Like there's a meeting. Like they probably think, come on, are you not even going to take a week off from dangerous activities? But for us, it was not an option at all. So it was quite. It was as a make or break type of moment. You're quite right.
No, it's amazing, and I wanted this interview to be what people don't know about you. Because actually the story from here, many people know and has been written. Many people see you in the media, but I feel like there are so many heroes in our country who have been through so much and sacrificed so much, whose stories we actually still don't know. Yes, we know some struggle stories that we've heard, but there are literally thousands and thousands of these stories of people who are like, who walk among us. And so just also from my perspective, like if I see you being criticized, which happens a lot, criticized being very unfairly in my view, the thing that angers me the most is people don't know what you had to do to get to where you are. And they'll never understand that. And that's what pains me. So it's cathartic in a way to be able to hear your story. I learned certain things that I didn't know about you, which is amazing. But just for you to know that, we love you, we respect you, we're so like proud of everything you've achieved, and that story is what has allowed the next generation to come and build on top of your legacy, Mamtolo's legacy, and the legacy before. As long as you know that, then we're happy.
No, thanks, boy. Of course, I love you guys too, very much. But it's also important for me that without me having to teach you these things, I'm assured that all my children have picked up these things. You know, your sister Zwagazi was telling me the other day that an Uber driver was asking her, so why do you get these great ideas? Yeah, and she was laughing.
It's a long story.
The long story. I grew up with this stuff. Yeah, I think that Uber driver was surprised at this kid who's jumped into the car and going on about the situation and analyzing. So that's the positive side, but also on the negative side, I think. I see sometimes you getting kind of rubbish commentary on Twitter or whatever. And I think ordinarily I would have to phone you and say, oh, no, these people are being unfair on you. But I don't do that because I know that, you know the stuff, you know the drill. It comes with the territory. You must just be determined to do what you have to do. You know, somebody once said that you can be loved by everyone as if you are money. Only money that is loved by everyone. Yeah,
absolutely.
So you'll have your critics, and but if you know what you're about and you have some deep convictions, and you're not doing these things for fame or show, but for their own sake, you know. You don't have to. People who know you, they know you. And those who think they know you, it's fine if that's what makes them feel happy. But you must never be sidetracked. So, for example, I talk about someone like Nelson Mandela. You know. The Nelson Mandela that is created now, or that we're all supposed to idolize, is the one that's created of maybe the last 10 years of his life by the media. But that same media portrayed him as the most horrific, devilish terrorist for so many years. That is why the same people who now want to lecture us about, you know, how you should conduct your struggle and how you must be polite and so on, are the same people who voted for 10 elections or whatever for Mandela to sit in jail for 27 years. And I always enjoy it when people say, oh, you know, you can't say that Mandela was in jail for 27 years. And say, but who kept him there? It's like he locked himself up there. So people imagine if he thought, oh, well, maybe I am this devilish terrorist. But he knew who he was. He did what he had to do. And some of them died thinking that. But those who lived to see his later life came to realize that what he was saying was the furthest thing from being devilish. So, and that's just a story for one person. But there are, as you correctly say, thousands of people who went through 10 times what I've just described to you, who have not been recognized, who are walking in the streets at the same time. And more importantly, there are other thousands of people who worshipped apartheid, who were and still are racists. Those people who tortured us, they're also walking in the streets. So I always worry about that even more. That, you know, maybe some guy that I'm bumping into at Pick and Pay or whatever could be the guy who tortured me or whatever. But, you know, society has sanitized that. Nobody is a racist or was a racist. Mandela imprisoned himself. We probably walked into the prisons and tortured ourselves. And all those people are gone now. Only angels are left. And we must not demand our freedom because, you know, it's rude or militant or whatever to do that. So that kind of nonsense really should not faze anybody who knows anything about the revolution. It is always going to be like that. You're going to be demonized and insulted and deliberately misunderstood. That's what it's all about. That's why it's called a revolution. It's not a Sunday picnic.
Well, Dad, I think it's interesting because we had a lot of other things, but your early story became too compelling, and we needed to just go into it in depth.
Yes.
And I think that's a beautiful way. People are spending family time talking to people in their families. Maybe it will also inspire these kind of conversations for those who are watching. There's another conversation which hopefully when, again, stars and diaries align, whether that's in another year or something, your life in the law.
Yes.
And the different cases and your views on the law. And just a precursor to that is you've always been criticized for your cases. So I remember when you're doing the Nkandla case, which could be viewed as against former President Zuma, the case about getting the state capture report and the state capture commission. I remember you being criticized. So those were very unpopular cases at a time. And then people forget and they're like, so your life in the law, we have to get into on another episode one of these days.
No, we must do that because that's actually crucial. Because also, funny enough, I spoke to you about the Cry the Beloved Country, a book I read when I was 13 or 14. There's a passage there in that which fascinated me about. It's something like it's kind of rhythmical, where the one person says to the other that if the law is unjust, then that law is not law or it's not justice, and so on, something like that. And I'm a big believer in that. So if you like, I don't subscribe to what one might call, now that you are a law student, one might call positivism. Oh yes, well, in case people didn't know
exactly.
that you are now studying for your 5th degree and it's in law.
As people can see, I come from a tradition of academic
excellence. Absolutely. But you have to have certain parameters. The law is a very serious business because like economics, I think it touches all of us. And therefore, my belief is that you need to pursue justice even more than the law, because sometimes those two things are different, the law and justice. And people don't understand that Nazism was the law, Apartheid was the law, colonialism was the law, but was it justice? No. So the fact that something is the law can be the most unjust system. So you need to be driven by something beyond the law, but justice itself. And one of the most important tenets of justice is that everybody is entitled to to legal representation. So something that I find revolting to deny somebody legal representation, as was done, for example, recently with Advocate Mkhize, the public protector. People do it so easily. They just take away your legal representation. So one of the legacies I'd like to leave is exactly that, to say anybody, but anybody. I'm talking about like the serial child rapist, pedophile, who rapes babies, the most vile human being you can think of. Anybody deserves legal representation, and it to represent that person as a lawyer, not as a member of society. You can, as a member of society, can condemn them or even beat them up if you want. But as a lawyer, a professional lawyer, your duty is to represent that person and do your best, do the best as you would be representing the Pope or any other person. Yeah. Otherwise, don't be a lawyer. If that's too much for you, that's fine. Then become an accountant or something else. Yeah. But once you've decided that this is going to be your role in society,
Yeah.
then there can't be anyone who is beneath legal representation. And so people will say, but how can you represent this one? How can you represent this one who did this and so on? But that's exactly, those are the people who require legal representation. And that's something I know that some of the young lawyers are beginning to realize this, and I get invited to talk to them and so on, and to explain it. But it's something that I feel very strongly about. And so I don't care whether you are Zuma or Patricia DeLille or anybody that I've represented, and you're the most hated or loved person, you can be sure that I'll represent you with everything I've got. And something I've said before is this. I always get asked by people, why, for example, they know that I'm a member, I was even a leader of the EFF at the time. Why, and even myself, I don't know, why have people come from the DA, like Patricia DeLille, UDM, COPE, IFP, ANC,
every faction,
CR17 and the so-called RET, come to me for representation. And I say, it's probably, I don't know why they do that, because they know where I stand politically. I never hide it. But I suspect they know that they're going to get professional representation, fearless representation. Whatever differences I might have with them politically are not going to feature, and I'm going to do the best that I can. So, and in a country where injustice is part of our DNA, I think that's important. Might be a small contribution, but it's one that has to be made. So you'll find that in these cases, this side, the public will be here, and others this side, and so on. But for me, it's all consistent. There's really been I've always done what I do. Also, by the way, people always say, how do you balance between your role as a lawyer and the role as a politician? And again, I said, I don't know where that differentiation is, because for me, it's about justice. I don't believe, I will never ever believe that you can get justice by being a lawyer only, or by cases, because that would take 1,000 years. So I believe if you want to change society, you must get your hands dirty in the political arena. And therefore, for me, the law and the politics are two sides of the same coin. It's a pursuit for justice, political justice, social justice, legal justice, economic justice, are all but sides of the same thing. And so there's no, I don't say, okay, now I'm the lawyer, or now I'm this or the other, because it's really the pursuit of the same thing called justice, which I feel deeply about. Even if it's just a small thing, even if I see somebody being stopped by the traffic police who should not be stopped, if I feel that this is unjust for some reason or another, I'll stop my car and go there and talk to them or whatever, and then move on.
That's what gets me. Now we're going into this, but hey,
yes, it was supposed to be the next episode.
But it's just so interesting. What also gets me, and I think it's detrimental to the practice when media narratives make it seem like the only cases that lawyers are doing are the public-facing ones. When you're doing so many cases at so many different times that nobody knows about. It'll be a pro bono case for someone who broke their leg and reached out to you, and there's no media spotlight on that.
No,
but it's like
it's the funniest thing. I mean, the detractors again, because of maybe when we do the next episode,
which we're not doing now.
Definitely not. But hey,
please tell me.
But that is it may. So you get, for example, there's this narrative because of the what I think are the biggest flaws in our judiciary. Something we'll talk about some other time. So there's this narrative about people don't understanding why you do certain cases, even when you know the outcome for various reasons, which I can't go into now. So they'll say, yeah, okay, well, but how can you do the case when you know you're going to lose? Yeah. And the favorite one, in fact, it was a couple of weeks ago. I was literally coming from court. I had just done, as you say, none of the cases in the public spotlight. I think it was a bail appeal or something. And so I'm on my way back. I get to my office, and then we're busy celebrating with the attorneys because we've just gotten this person out on bail. But on Twitter, the message is, oh, well, when did you last win a case?
Yeah, exactly.
And I think, okay, if I could answer and say, well, actually 5 minutes ago, But, you know, you just have to, you can't, because if you ever got thrown into that mundane, banal, stupid level, then you'll just go mad,
And
so
when it was in Gandla and the state capture report and secret ballot and all of those massive, no one was like, oh, it's just a trail of victories only.
Absolutely. Yeah, when did you last lose a case? No, nobody asked that. No, but again, you know, the idea of looking into the big picture and doing what you do best, and knowing that you do things that actually many people wouldn't even dream of doing. Breaking new law, creating new precedent, and making problems for the law students, because law students, I'm not their favorite right now, because they keep on saying, all these cases you are doing, now they come into the exams, because these things nobody used to even talk about them. Now we're being asked about this case and that case, which I find quite fascinating.
Well, the funniest moment for me, by the way, on that was in my company law exam when I had Mpofu versus the SABC as a case to study, and I was like, by the way, a case that no one actually reads.
Absolutely.
Which completely, let's not even go into that.
No, it's true. I once had to rely on that case in court, and the judge was laughing, but I was quite serious. In the case of Mpofu versus SABC and so on, even my opponent picked up laughing. But no, you're right. Look, one day the stories will be written. One day we'll probably do a book, hopefully.
I hope so.
On some of these
cases. If Netflix is watching, like at some point. Well, I think the thing I've always felt is that firstly, you're so busy that you don't have time to tell your story. But we've barely scratched the surface here, and at some point we need to think about how we tell the story in its full depth and complexity.
Well, I know a good interviewer.
Well, this is part one of
absolutely
volume one.
But as it happens, I also have a son who's studying film and media.
Exactly.
And a daughter who likes making money.
So
I think we've got it all in the family.
Dad, thank you so much. We look forward to the Life in the Law episode. But I think, today was really amazing to hear your story, hear what made you who you are, and the parts of the Dali Mpofu that nobody has got to see. So thank you so much for taking time out of your very busy schedule to join us on SMWX. And
well done, my boy. It is very good. And I suppose it's aye. That's the word. Well done, sis.
Thanks, Dad.
Say hi to Hakim.
Hakim.